From Los Alamos National Laboratory, this is the National Security Science Podcast.
We didn't dare fill the bathtub 3 times. We agreed to fill it good and full once and take turns.
Hello, listeners. Today we have a little something special for you, our annual holiday podcast. As snow falls on the Pajarito Plateau, and we welcome another holiday season at Los Alamos National Laboratory, we're taking you back to the Manhattan Project. If you love Los Alamos history, this podcast is for you, as we will reflect on what the holiday season was like during the Manhattan Project. National Security Science writer Jill Gibson will read stories written by the wife of one of the scientists who helped build the world's first atomic bomb. But first, we are going to listen to excerpts from Edith Warner's Christmas letters. Edith Warner was known for feeding scientists dinner during the Manhattan Project at her cozy home next to Ottawee Bridge. She was a very poetic and hardworking woman, and she was also a good friend to the Manhattan Project director himself, J. Robert Oppenheimer. Her writing is well loved, as you will see, including her Christmas letters that are today published in the House at Ottawee Bridge by Peggy Pond Church. Oppenheimer met Edith Warner in 1937 on a pack trip, and she references this meeting in this letter, and this particular letter is written in 1943, and Edith reflects on the year when, quote, "The valley was quiet no longer." And with us today, we have the director of the Bradbury Science Museum, Linda Deck, here to read for us. So without further ado, here is Linda.
A year ago, doubts assailed me. Could I swing this business with gas rationed? Ought I put aside selfish desire and go back to the outside world and a war job? I had not learned, in spite of much experience, that I am not, and never have been, the guiding hand in my life. Something, what I do not venture to say, has prevented what I thought I wanted to do and pushed me into what I eventually did. Also, no matter how uncertain the immediate future or marginless, a solution has always presented itself in time. Into this fairly remote section, last December came the Army, commandeering Los Alamos School, Anchor Ranch, and the small native ranches on all the Pajarito Plateau for some very secret project. The construction company has just completed the building. A new road is almost finished. Many civilians live there, and the whole area is guarded by soldiers. Santa Fe calls it a submarine base, as good a guess as any. It leaves only Mrs. Fry at Frijoles and me at the river, and we are newcomers, comparatively speaking. Workmen and material began to go by in great quantity, so that the valley was quiet no longer. For a year it has continued. Along about April, the X's began coming down from Los Alamos for dinner once a week, and they were followed by others. Stranger even than the Army's choosing this locality was that the civilian head should be a man I knew. He had stopped years ago on a pack trip, come back for chocolate cake, brought a wife, and now was to be my neighbor for the duration. That beginning has increased until there are 1 or 2 groups on most nights for dinner. They come in through the kitchen door, talk a bit before leaving, and are booked up weeks ahead. Because they are isolated and need even this change for morale, I feel it is definitely a war job for me. Fall was especially beautiful, and I wangled enough free hours to climb mesas and enough gas to go up to Navawii for a picnic. All that and the kitchen gab fest compensated for the summer. Winter means better radio reception, some time to read, walks for mail. Soon it will be Christmas Eve, and Tilano will light the little pitchwood fire out near the well house to welcome those spirits that draw near on that night. Inside, candles will burn, and juniper fragrance will fill the house. Then I shall think of you all and wish that I might share with you the beauty and the peace. The essence of this land fills me at such times, as whenever I give it opportunity, and I know that I have been given more than one human's share of joy.
Thank you, Linda. In the show notes, I'll link to an article by the National Security Science Research Center about Edith Warner. And again, you can find the full unabridged letter in The House at Ottawee Bridge by Peggy Pond Church. And now we will hear the stories of Eleanor Jette. In 1943, Eleanor Jette accompanied her husband, scientist Eric Jette, to the secret city of Los Alamos. The couple brought with them their 10-year-old son, Bill. Over the next 2 years, Eleanor would face many hardships as she plunged into the world of secrecy, isolation, and intense work. Throughout it all, Eleanor stayed positive. She chronicled her experiences in her book, Inside Box 1663, a reference to the single post office box that all of the Los Alamos family shared. Eleanor and her family spent 2 holiday seasons on the hill. In 1944, she invited several of the town's bachelors and military personnel over for Christmas dinner. Let's listen as National Security Science Magazine writer Jill Gibson reads Eleanor's description of that holiday.
We had more than 20 guests, and it was no mean feat to prepare food for that number with our substandard cooking facilities. We built out the table from the dinette into the living room, set the chairs as close as possible, and for the first time in my life, the meal was ready to serve when the first guest arrived at the door. I put dinner on the table while the men superintended a round of eggnogs. We demolished 2 12-pound turkeys, 7 pies, 20 pounds of mashed potatoes, and various poundages of cranberries, green beans, fruits, and nuts. How we ever prepared it, I don't know, and where it went is an equal mystery. We finished our meal and put the wreckage in the kitchen before we collapsed over chairs and stretched out on the floor.
Eleanor goes on to write of a holiday season filled with music and theater. As 1944 draws to a close, she describes the festivities.
There were parties galore, and several families pooled their resources to give a New Year's Eve party at Fuller Lodge. It was the beginning of a tradition. We laughed, skidded, and danced. We rang out the old year and rang in the new one with the bell that once summoned the range schoolboys to meals. We joined hands and sang Auld Lang Syne at 2 a.m. on the morning of January 1st, 1945. The very way we sang portended momentous events.
1 year later was winter of 1945, and the Japanese had surrendered. Everyone in Los Alamos was in high spirits despite the severe water shortage plaguing the hill. As many scientists prepared to leave the laboratory, the Jette family moved into a house on Bathtub Row, but there was no water for a bath. Eleanor had planned a New Year's Eve party, and that night, the Los Alamos people received good news.
There was rejoicing throughout the town when the radios announced there was enough water stored so all the townspeople could bathe that evening. We conferred. We didn't dare fill the bathtub 3 times. We agreed to fill it good and full once and take turns. I climbed in first, Eric followed me, and Bill, voted grimiest member of the family, was last. An air of optimism prevailed at the party. Everyone was clean and they were exhilarated by the sensation. The skit was especially funny. It poked fun at the water crisis. It was typical of the spirit that pervaded everything we did. Then, As the last minutes of 1945 ticked away, I found myself standing alone. I watched the merriment. The bell ringers waited at their post with their eyes on their watches. I thought of the momentous events of the passing year and remembered Oppie's speech when he accepted the War Department scroll on the day of the Army-Navy E Award. Robert Oppenheimer, with his crew cut and electric blue eyes, was the man who guided the work and wove the threads together. That day, he was us. He spoke to us and for us when he warned that the people of this world must unite or they would perish. I realized that the mighty force liberated by the laboratory must be used for mankind's benefit and not for its destruction, lest the name of Los Alamos live in infamy forever. There, in the place of war and dedicated to man's most deadly achievement, I closed my eyes and wished for 1,000 years of peace. The bell tolled midnight.
Thank you, Jill. A special thanks to Linda Deck for reading the parts by Edith Warner. Thank you to Sharon Snyder at the Los Alamos Historical Society for posting about Edith Warner's Christmas letters. And thank you so much for listening to the National Security Science Podcast. Don't forget to check out our National Security Science magazine online at lanl.gov/magazine to learn more about how better science equals better national security. For more great stories from Los Alamos, including several other podcasts, video series, and interactive stories, visit discover.lanl.gov. And happy holidays from all of us on the National Security Science magazine team.